So I think this is the first time we've had such a panel discussion at this conference. So enjoy. I think the panel that's assembled before you, probably by my reckoning, has about a century's experience between them. So make the best of it and don't be shy about asking questions. But to frame the discussion, obviously Charles said we're in two parts. This is broadly speaking about how you get to XML and what you do once you get there. So maybe if we start in this first part with how to get to XML. So you've all convinced me with your excellent sales skills that I really need XML. I have a large body of content, legacy documents. I need to capture them as XML, convert them to XML. Where do I start?
Is this on?
It's on.
Okay, good. Sorry, I'm too loud anyway. I'd like to start that because I think the first thing you have to do, which is the stage a whole lot of people skip, is a needs analysis. Why do you want XML? Did your CEO read about it in an airline magazine and think it would be cool? Do you have real needs? If so, what are they? Because no other decisions you make are going to be good ones if you don't know why.
So we're taking a step back really and saying why. Yeah, so perhaps there is a pre-stage where you say, why XML?
Yeah, why XML? Exactly why. What are you trying to do? Save time, save money, both of those things are possible. Go into a monster database. Maybe you've got some tools you have to use. Maybe you have to exchange with your business partners. Know why.
Part of which may be just keeping your options open.
Yes, and we can be here another 1,000 years if you want everything to do with it. I once was writing a document model for people who said, well, what do you want to do with your data? They said everything. And we said, okay, so we need to tag parts of speech and what language they come from. And that backed them off. They said, maybe not everything.
But Debbie, one of the things is, who are you? Because what happens in lots of environments, there's the you who is represented, but it doesn't represent all the other yous in the community. And so when things start getting developed, all these peripheral people start coming in and having different views. So knowing who the yous are, if I may be colloquial about it, is really important about it, a part of it too.
Okay, so Sharon says, know who you are and how many of you they're likely to be, and I say, know why.
And I agree.
Yeah, the other aspect, Robin Fontaine, by the way, DeltaXML, we haven't actually identified ourselves.
Yes, sorry, I did skip that stage by mistake.
We
sorry,
might not know who we are, that's all.
Yes. Do you want to do that quickly? Pass it round.
Reading my name tag, I'm Debbie Lapeyre, Mulberry Technologies.
Gerrit, Imsieke, le-tex Publishing Services. You know me. And I'm Blake from Williams le-tex.
There we go, it's green.
Does that work? Yeah. Yeah, so I'm Terry Blake from Williams le-tex, which formerly from the stationery office, which was bought by Williams le-tex. So I've been in electronic publishing for about 30 years.
Tony Graham with Antenna House, but I've also previously worked with Andrew, with Terry and with Debbie. So.
So now we'll let you,
Yeah,
we'll let you talk.
now is what I was about to say. I think the other aspect, I mean, we've talked about the technical side of it, but there's also never ever forget the people side of it in terms of who you've got and whether you're going to be able to persuade them to use XML, etc. I mean, the answer is probably no, but at least you've got to think about that at the beginning and work that through, because that's probably more important than the technical side very often, I'm afraid.
Okay, so let's can we safely assume then that we have made the sale now, and we want to move to XML tentatively?
Let me just say, Andrew, just before you go on to
Go ahead, please.
there's one other question, which is how much money have you got? Because money drives everything. You know, what you're going to get back from the data, you're going to generate value, what you're going to spend. You might be able to get some XML for some money, but if you want the XML that you really want, so you're going to mark up every verb, you're going to have to pay. And who's sponsoring the project? Because if it's coming from IT and it's going to involve authors not from IT, from business people, you're probably going to fail because they will initially hate XML. They might learn to love it, but very often you'll start off by hating it. The first problem in any IT project gets sat on by a business, so business sponsorship is essential. And that needs education because they probably don't understand in the business what XML will actually do for them or not.
I think that's a good point. How expensive exactly is XML? You don't have to answer that. Dollars per tag, please.
One of the reasons many people adopt XML is to have faster and cheaper processes. And it can be faster. But it can also expose... Right now, your costs are distributed between 2,800 departments. And suddenly, your costs are all in one place, and you can see them. So it's going to look more expensive, even if it's less than half what it used to be.
And sometimes competitors of ours talk customers into designing their own bespoke DTDs or schemas. So we recommend use something off the shelf because there's not just the some competitors use it as a kind of gateway drug to get into the customer. Yeah, we make a schema for free, and then they try to profit from other tasks there. And you must not underestimate the additional costs of having anything bespoke in there. So there every commonly used schema has their own hooks for customization, and the minute you need them and you do your own stuff, you have to rework on the editing tools and on the validation tools and everything. So use something off the shelf.
Darling Colossus or something.
Press the button.
Button one.
Side button. Left side.
Oh, in the no.
That's on. That's on.
All right. So, well, the other part of cost is the first output format is expensive, but then part of why you go to XML is if you want to produce multiple formats or multiple things, and then incrementally, the second one isn't going to cost twice the first format. If you produce HTML and then printed output from a common source, then you're saving money compared to a complete conversion from text data to something else. It's the reusability of XML that is often the driver for why you want to use it.
If you, you're talking about formats and about publishing, but the question was how to get XML into your company. And there's many more appliances for XML than just formatting documents or structuring documents. What I find in my line of work, which is a lot, but is to when you want structured data, XML could be a good choice, but the cost for it is often not the tooling or the technology itself, but it's to educate the people, both down the line and the developers, to use these tools efficiently. If it's only for a small part of your whole project or stream that you're working on, then this investment is often not done because business owners won't want to invest a lot of time teaching a relatively complex tool chain. So they invest a little bit. Let's say, oh, XML is a good idea. It's structured. There's a lot of books about it. It must be good. So let's use it. And then after a couple of months, they write something in XML. XSD, no, that's too difficult. So let's just, make some XML files. Oh, we can process them with, I don't know, C#, Java. Oh, we can also use XLT. No, that looks too difficult. Let's stick to Java. So before you know it, the company said we are using XML, but they're using all kinds of self-made little tools to combine it together. And 3 years later, some smart guy may stand up and say, hey, we can do this better. But it can also go the other way, and it gets more expensive and more difficult to maintain.
I would concur with that. I mean, most people choose something because they've got a problem to solve. And often when I get in front of somebody who's, say, I want to use XML or whatever, the problem they think they're solving won't necessarily be solved by using XML. And actually, you may introduce other problems which they won't have known now, and you've got to tell them about that to come later. But there are obviously lots of situations where what they're trying to do is only going to work if you do some sort of structured document type solution. I mean, we do legislation, so legislation is huge. It's a huge amount of content. So, and all the processes and all the downstream processes you do around that, you wouldn't be able to succeed if you didn't have some sort of structured content in that process. And coming back to the main topic, in terms of conversion, we've had problems. For us, it's a given. We're going to have XML, and we've generated processes over time where you can capture content into XML, but we've had legacy content that we've had to convert. And that legacy content has been in all different sorts of formats. Some of which, the only way we could get hold of it is by going back to printed text and capturing it from source. So I guess my 2 pence on that, how would you do that? How did we do it? We did it by getting it rekeyed. So double key. It's the only way you can do it. And we offshored it. And we managed to get to a certain level of quality by doing that. But there's another level you have to go to where you need some domain expertise about the content that you're managing. So we had to use an internal team to do that sort of second stage to get that bit right. And I'll give you an example of why a schema, and you've seen it today, can only validate so much. And there's normally in a schema some sort of level of flexibility of how you can use that particular syntax. And actually, sometimes it matters how you form something. So if you don't actually do it in the way from the expertise or from the experience you have, you end up not getting downstream what you want. And the only way to do that is by having experts that can do it.
I agree, Abel, I really do. The cliche we used to use way back in the SGML days was there was always a cheaper, faster, easier way to do any one thing than to use XML or SGML. But the minute you need to do 1.5, you need to think. And if you need to do 2, you've got your answer. I started life as a maintenance programmer, junior programmer, right out of college. And for a while, I thought the entire job of maintenance programmers was to write conversion software from X to Y, from System X on large IBM mainframes to System Y, where all the file structures are taken. I'd rather come out of XML into anything than anything into XML. That's got to be factored into the costs too.
Yeah, there was the topic of legacy conversion. Usually it's being done in a batch and you have some schematron rules for validating and you take samples and check it. Sometimes another approach is more appropriate, something like lazy evaluation. So we did it for DIN, for the German standardization body. They moved their documents, they are printed from Word currently still, and they have been edited as doc files, and then they migrated to a slightly different template and to docx with the new Word OML formulas. And they first asked us to convert it in a single batch, every 20,000 or so Word documents that they have, or maybe even more. And we convinced them to just converted once a new version of that standard is going to be published, and when some people who can look at the conversion results, who have to check the text anyway, will look at it and can apply corrections. And in the meantime, also as an additional effect, the converter can be further developed, and we have made major progress now recently. I think Martin is going to showcase that tonight in converting these math type formulas to MathML, and from there to that OML. The math type DLL is faulty. We have approximately 5% of formulas that can't be converted. And we now eliminated that, and the conversion quality to this these DocX formula is much better now. And if they had converted that in a single batch, they would have, somebody would have to rekey 5% of the formulas. And so by just deferring it a bit, you can benefit from advances in conversion technologies. But it's another aspect is, of course, you want to have a homogeneous data base that you can query with a single interface. So it's always a trade-off whether to do this kind of lazy evaluation or do it in a single batch.
Just to say one thing about conversion, there's one thing you might have to say to a customer which they don't want to hear. It depends on the problem you're trying to solve. But where the data isn't just a legacy image or something in the past, but something's going to be used to describe, for instance, new electronic products going forward, you might need to tell them they shouldn't convert legacy data, they actually need to start again, which is something no one wants to hear. But if your goal is focused reuse, heavy reuse of content, and that hasn't been authored in a way which is at all appropriate for reuse, or is based solely in a book format, where actually the main deliverable is going to be an online web database of information, where you've got text saying C above, which there isn't. You can't convert, not and get the quality and meet the aims of what you're trying to do. No one wants to hear that.
I was about to say the same. So, look, in most cases, when I'm confronted with this, I would say that conversion is not a good idea, because you may have a digital format that you think you can convert from, but if you're going from a non-structured to a structured scenario, the post-processing you have to do once you've done the conversion, which sometimes be like picking up a piece of soap. Every time you change one thing, you've got to tweak your conversion to do something else. You've still got to post-process it, and then by the time you've added the costs of both phases, it's going to be more expensive. So again, I'd go back, you just rekey it. And mostly, there have been situations where we have successfully converted legacy data, but I'd say it's less than 10%, yeah.
Well, how do you decide when to actually convert and when not to?
The quality of the source data.
Because, you could convert, let's say, legal commentary, and there's so much of it, and it changes all the time. So you have to keep the process going. So if you have 100,000 donkeys somewhere typing away, they have a lot of typing to do to keep track of all the changes.
It's an economics thing. It comes down to what does it cost, and you're weighing up between and what you're trying to achieve. Because if 100% accuracy is really important, then you might need to decide how you're going to get there. But however, if good enough is good enough, then sometimes conversion can work.
How do you know what's accurate?
It also depends on what kind of documents you start with. Legislation and legal documents are very complicated. Journal articles are pretty dirt simple. They looked a whole lot like they do now in 1730, okay? You can probably convert your journal articles. Think about the level of complexity you need, and think about what you need for retrieval. We did a project for the American Library of Congress, which is our big national library, and all they wanted was for people not to touch their source documents anymore because the source documents were falling apart. And accuracy was good enough if you could tell you needed this page and they could bring you up a photocopy of the page. That was good enough accuracy. Okay, so they looked into rekeying, and that was just so expensive. And they looked into OCR, and some of it worked and some of it didn't. But What they ended up with was this is good enough to find the document, and that's the only level they needed.
The question of quality has come up, I think, several times, and I think one aspect of that is the design and the engineering you do at the beginning, because it is quite tempting when you're looking at going to XML to say, oh, we'll have this, we'll have that, we'll have the other, we'll do all sorts of clever stuff, and you end up with something that's overcomplicated. So it is a question of trying to start simple, but think about where you might go. Plan for the future, but start as simple as you can. I think in the first place is probably good.
So let's assume now then that we've done our legacy conversion, and we're in that happy.
It was easy. It was all journal articles.
Yeah.
It was really easy.
It only took 12 years, and we're in that happy place that we've got XML editors, maybe the sun's shining, the birds are singing. How do I get my content creators, the people who are authoring, editing that content, still to get it right and not slowly degrade the quality of what's been converted so far? How do I maintain the quality?
Well, that's down to two things, isn't it? Tools and people. One is easier than the other. But I mean, that battle is still going on. That is the same question that was being asked, 10, 20, and probably even longer ago than that, in terms of how do we persuade people actually to use these things. The tools have got hugely better now, so I think it is actually much easier for people to use it. But people still actually want to use Word. And that is an uphill struggle. I don't think there is any one answer to that. If anybody's got one answer, let us know. I don't have an answer for that. It is hard graft. You've got to persuade people, I think, that the benefit is worth the pain that they've got to go through to get it. And you've also got to make it appropriately simple for them, because, I mean, lawyers do not want to look at markup, for example. So it's got to be some system that they are comfortable with. Otherwise, it just will not work.
Carrots are good if you can. We worked on some DTDs way back when for the Congressional Research Service, and they are the people in the United States that write reports for congressmen and senators. And the idea is your senator requests a report, they do the research, they write it up, they send it in. The carrot we offered them was use our brand new XML system and we will have it on your senator's desk in 3 hours. Or you can do it in WordPerfect, the way you've been doing it for the last 30 years, and we can have it there in 3 days. That was not enough to get all of them to convert.
Look, in any process, you need to have some sort of QA in it in order to make sure that the accuracy you're trying to get is there. And that may involve tools, it may involve people. And also it involves your end users as well, because eventually you're going to put your content out there and they're going to find mistakes in it.
Well, I mean, you need some mechanism to find the differences between what you've done and what you haven't. I mean, it's more like Robin's thing, but if you're converting into XML or in the continuing process, then you find the differences, you round trip and compare it with the original to make sure you haven't actually lost anything. I mean, I favour using tools to help people do these things, because people are expensive and unfortunately error prone.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give an example. We also publish the Gazette, and we give out, so we publish like 200,000 notices every year, and they're in XML. And we give our end users, who are anybody, these are members of the public, just putting in their notices through a web interface. They can use Word, they can use a web interface, they can use XML, and then we post-publish it. We go through processes in order before it finally becomes on the website. And one of the things we do as part of the solution we provide for our client is we have to assure that the content that arrives on the end is the same as what came in. So we do use tools in that case to do extract just the text, and then do sort of plain text comparison between what went in, which might have been a Word file, and what comes out, which eventually is some HTML. And then make sure that everything is the same. It's something like that. It's very practical, quite easy to do. It works.
I want to stress really, really strongly what 2 or 3 people on this panel have already said. Put as much QA into your XML as you would into a beautiful print product. My company was hired for about a day and a half by a large publisher in Philadelphia who said, we want you to write conversion instructions so good that we don't have to do QA. And I said, how many stages do you go through? They made beautiful magazines, okay? I said, how many stages do you go through with the designer to get that magazine format right? And they said, oh, well, 6, but now it's in machine readable form and we should just be able to convert it. We don't want to do QA. And we said, you've got to do QA, and that's why we were only there 6 hours. They fired us. And we got home. We drove home from Philadelphia. That's about a 2-hour drive. And we got a phone call from from Elliot Kimber, for those of you who know him, another XML consultant who said, I understand so-and-so fired you. And I went, yeah, how'd you hear already? It just happened about 2 hours ago. And he said, oh, well, they fired me last week. And the week before that, they fired this other famous consultant. And the week before that, they fired Really Systems. He said, you're the 4th one. We've all told them they need to do QA.
Yeah, I think just picking up on something that Terry said, this business of perhaps extracting the text and then checking that the text is still there when you've finished. Identifying those sorts of acid tests, as it were, at the beginning of your project, it can be really worthwhile. Things that you can say, let's try and make sure that this is a constant throughout and that we can check it relatively easy, and therefore we've got our quality in there. Because, I mean, dropping words in legal documents is a bit of a no-no, obviously. So you've really got to make sure that you don't. So think about what those tests can be and put them in. And certainly we found that, I mean, even just in our own software development, because obviously we're doing comparison of documents, etc., and we do some of those tests. And sometimes we've almost refused to do some types of development because it's going to break some of those really critical tests. And those really critical tests have actually helped us to find serious bugs in different areas. So it's well worth thinking about at the beginning.
One other small statistic. Remember, I come out of the document world, not the data world, but a 99.8% accuracy is 5 errors per page. And in a document, that's rather horrible, but I should imagine in financial transactions, it's even worse.
Yeah, one aspect, of course, is whether the text is identical. The other thing is you have a constantly developing set of schematron rules. Usually, almost everybody is doing schematron for quality assurance. Don't forget, if you have larger rekeying or conversion batches, and you will always discover new errors in these legacy documents, and you will always invent new schematron rules to discover them. Don't forget to apply the new schematron rules to the previously converted documents. So have at best have everything in an XML database where you can apply also schematron or XSLT efficiently, and or another environment where you don't have to fire up a JVM for every schematron validation. So I have something where you can really quickly apply the new schematron rules to the old documents and get reports and act upon them.
What those of you who are up there, as opposed to down here, can't see, is Gerrit's telling his story, and I catch 5 heads going, that one bit me.
I think there's a question about it.
Sometimes the business, they didn't have automated validation in place, and then you come and introduce it, schematron, schema, etc.
It's very different.
And they're doing like they got targets and stuff. and they ask you to switch it off.
Of course, it doesn't have to be too noisy. If it's too noisy, the reports, then nobody will pay attention anymore. So it's a fine balance, and you have to also retune your checking rules whether the people start ignoring the reports because of there's too much noise, and you can, if you write these rules, you have that one case that initiated writing this rule in the first place, and you cannot be sure that it won't fire unnecessarily with other documents. So act upon or get feedback from the users actually looking at these documents, whether they start ignoring some reports, and then it's a kind of alarm. Yeah.
Yes, an error message.
QA off, I like that.
Error message stops you, whereas a warning you read once and then you forget thereafter, maybe. Well, I think we have to end it there and go and get some coffee. So, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, it's. I think we all agree about the importance of QA. But I heard a number of things. And is there some sort of a don't make it too noisy? I heard Terry say earlier we got quality back, but we needed subject matter experts to review some stuff. And is there like a general or quick advice on how to do things like that fast? Is that what do you commonly do? Make sure that it's visualized. How do you get the noise out, and how do you know what the noise, how important the noise is, and how I can quickly spot what is important and what not?
I think you must not switch off your common sense with when looking at these things. It's always different depending on the. Of course, you can state some common rules, and we can with our collective experience maybe write a book. But as we know, nobody reads these detailed instructions, and so automatic rules are good, but you always have to apply some common sense to that, so there's no general rule.
One more thing. It may change over time. There is no such thing as great for all time. We wrote a document model for drug monographs, and those are the package inserts you see in drugs, and the PDR is full of them, things like that. And they knew what they wanted. They wanted all drug names and street names and generic names. They wanted all that stuff tagged. So they created elements for it, and they said, look, we can't afford it. And their website came up, and their users said, without that, it's useless. So suddenly they could afford it, and while I wrote the model to tell them what they could tag where, I couldn't have tagged that stuff. They hired pharmacology graduate students, hordes of them, to go through and circle in the data. This is a street name, this is a generic name, this is for the 8 or 9 things they wanted, they hired graduate students to do it, and they hired pharmacists to check it.
If the business case adds up, if you know why you're doing it in the first place, that can say you've got the money, it's back to the money.
Well, their users told them, we don't want your website without that. Okay.